Good morning. Welcome again to Morning Devotions. Thank you again so much for our time together. In the world that we live in today, there's a tremendous new revelation of the doctrines of grace, and I am a grace preacher. So was the Apostle Peter. So was Paul. We are saved by grace, Peter said. Now, brothers and sisters, understanding that we are saved by grace is one of the most important truths that a believer can have. That we are not saved by works, lest any man that boast. We're saved by the grace of God. Now, grace is this great motivating desire of God. If you wonder what grace is, well, it's God's riches at Christ's expense, yes, but it's the great motivator of God. It's one of those underlying things that causes God to do what he does. Now, I want you to notice what Paul says in Titus chapter 2, verse 11. For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation to all people. But now, don't stop with that verse. Verse 12. Training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age. Now, people oftentimes take the doctrines of grace and use it as an excuse for sin. I had one of the young people walk up and hand me a picture of a Facebook post by a very famous woman preacher in a tube top in a club with a big glass of alcohol saying, "I'm a gracist." And they said, "Pastor, what does this mean?" And I said, "I'm sorry. Please just act like you didn't see that and just go read your Bible and focus on Jesus." But so often today in the world, people are using grace as a license for sin. That it doesn't matter how we live because we're saved by grace. And they extort it to some doctrines like once saved, always saved. So in other words, if you ever come into a relationship with Christ, you're definitely going to heaven no matter how you live the rest of your life. And those things are just, they're taking the beautiful truth of grace and stretching it like a rubber band until it's not a truth anymore. Now notice what Paul said. Grace is a teacher. Grace trains us to renounce ungodliness. Grace teaches us to renounce worldly passions. It doesn't tell us to go enjoy ourselves. When grace is working in your life, you don't live in sin. When grace is working in your life, you turn away from these things because grace is teaching you to reject sin. Grace is teaching you to renounce sin. Grace is teaching you to live self-controlled. Grace is teaching you to live upright. Grace is teaching you to live a godly life. So may I encourage you today, rather than listen to people who say they're teaching grace, why don't you listen to what grace is teaching you?